Hey there! Welcome back to the Notebook channel where we talk all things arts, pop culture, current events, and just whatever's been going up in this thing here.
I made this tweet. All the girls look like this in high school could suck a mean dick. Blah, blah, blah. Excuse me, ma'am, not to be disrespectful or rude, but could you please take post down? That is my sister who was killed by a metro train. And this post is very disrespectful. I don't know who you are or if you even know her, but I need you to take this down, please.
Baby, this is Keke Palmer. This is motherfucking Keke Palmer.
Today I'm giving y'all this Corbin blue hair. What do you think? Am I giving y'all Corbin blue or no? This is my natural hair with some leave-in conditioner in it. But I like this. And if you do, be sure to like this video, subscribe, and also comment. I truly love engaging with y'all in the comment section below. And it's like those little things like those that go a long way with small channels like mine. So please, 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 if you find any small channels, be sure to like and comment, okay? Before we actually get into the meat and potatoes of the video, I wanted to inform you about one of the sources that I am going to end up using. I found this essay written by a community that are incarcerated in the American prison system. Yes, it is written by prisoners. And on the upper left-hand side of the website, there is a disclaimer saying that the website is being monitored by the FBI or government officials. And I would recommend, as the website says, to go and use search engines browsers like DuckDuckGo, because it will best hide your internet trail. And I won't leave it in the description as a hyperlink. I will make sure that you have to copy and paste and actually intentionally go through with this decision to visit their website and see what they are about. But just know that I'm leaving it in your hands to make that choice for yourself. I was struggling whether or not to utilize their publication as a resource, but there was just something about listening and hearing people who are not normally heard in my critiques of Lin's work, which on the contrast uplift institutions of power while not really acknowledging marginalized communities. It just felt like something it was in my heart to do it. So I was really scared. That's why it took a little bit of a longer time for me to film this video, was because I was a little nervous about using the source. But if you're watching this, then I went through with it. So I hope you enjoy this video. My first video about Hamilton that I really want to re-edit now because I'm a little bit better at editing and filming. Sorry about the audio issues in that one. I discuss whether or not Hamilton is part of the master narrative or if it's a counter narrative. And you can watch the first part of Hamilton, the major overview video, up with the card there. Now that there aren't any stipulations on whether Hamilton is actually able to reclaim the narrative of the marginalized, we have to talk about the biggest element of the entire production, which is
Sugar Hill Gang.
The hip hop, you don't stop. You rock it out, baby, rubber to the boogity bang bang, the boogie to the boogity beat.
Hip hop, a hip it to the hip hop, and you don't stop, a rockin' to the bang bang boogie. Say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie the beat.
the genre of music Hamilton utilizes to tell his story, as Lin would put it, is hip hop. And why this is important is because when you utilize certain styles of music in film or theater, it often harkens back and calls attention to the historic, symbolic significance of the culture it pulls from and the context of when people would play that kind of music. And hip-hop, by its design, is a counter-narrative. Gangsta rap, otherwise known in the 1980s and 90s as reality rap, was a reflection of the mass revolutionary spirit that fueled the Black and Brown power movements of the previous generation. In issue 10 of Under Locks and Keys, a publication organized and published by a study group from USW, stands for the United Struggle from Within, they published an article titled Hip Hop, Living Culture or Commodity, which discusses how capitalism changed hip-hop from being a counter-narrative to a sanitized commodity. Hip-hop developed as a living dynamic life of a community. Oppressed people in North American ghettos, before going global, hip-hop culture was commodified by white record owners for white consumers. They sold this exotic culture to white youths looking for rebellion and excitement. With hip-hop, corporate America could sell much more sanitized and safer version of Black rebellion to white folks. And while there were benefits in terms of building of public opinion around the struggle of the oppressed group, this was soon drowned out in what became a new form of reinforcing racist ideologies. Talking about cooning, okay, coons. This article outlines two key issues that plague hip-hop culture. 1. Rappers who claim they are merely street reporters. Rappers who tell the truth of what they see without offering any solutions or organizing are resigning to the acceptance and reinforcement of the status quo. And 2, this mindset of acceptance only compounds itself when those that do make it create these reports that sell to white youths and please white corporations. This happens all the time. And so coming from the depressed ghettos of the 1980s, flooded with crack cocaine by the CIA, there was no questions of whether or not to become a professional rapper if the opportunity presented itself. As Tupac rapped in his song, Don't Stop,
if I wasn't spitting, it'd be prison to death. This rap game, all we got left. So try to comprehend where we coming from. Life is an outlaw, ain't meant for everyone. So here we come, recognize how we organize, strategize, now we unify, brothers on the rise.
Yes, a lot of us found a way to eat, but the result was a lack of potency in the music and a watered-down culture where cars and ice are the motivating factor. It is a culture that is teaching our youth that it's all about them as individual. That is the influence of capitalism. This leads the study group to make a bold statement. Hip-hop is dead until it takes up revolutionary politics. In many interviews, Lin have said that he is a big fan of hip-hop, naming artists like Biggie Smalls, Mobb Deep, DMX, Black Sheep, A Tribe Called Quest, Dr. Dre, Run the Jewel, and Chica, to only name few, making numerous nods to various moments of hip-hop culture throughout the production of Hamilton. Lin-Manuel Miranda has said that hip-hop being the language of revolution, it is our greatest American art form. They write so brilliantly that they transcend their circumstances and they change the world literally through the power of their pen and their delivery and their oratory. That's the fundamental idea in it. That's why it's such a love letter to hip-hop. By focusing on writing out of struggle, Lin-Manuel Miranda plays into the corporate ideals of a commoditized hip-hop. In the video of how rap works,
before Hamilton came out, you couldn't think of people less suited to rap than the founding fathers. When Lin first mentioned the idea, it got a laugh.
I'm actually working on a hip-hop album about the life of someone I think embodies hip-hop, Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton. You laugh, but it's true.
But in Hamilton's wake, we see that the supposed elements of the hip-hop musical were based on what stories rappers typically have told, but they do not cover what stories hip-hop potentially could tell as it continues to grow and evolve. So the question is, how did Lin write a hip-hop musical about the whitest people ever? People who may have lived in cities, but were not in the inner city, which is basically a euphemism for city areas with socioeconomic problems that since the 60s is often said as a dog whistle for people of color. No, PolitiFact even quotes a historian calling the Founding Fathers far from ordinary in terms of income, wealth, education, and social standing. How did Lin write a musical about those guys yet still remain authentic to the hip-hop experience? This is the first in a multi-part video essay about how rap works in Hamilton.
But this is something I would like to focus on. Does it actually work? Does it? Undeniably, since the 1800s, white Americans have been fascinated by Black culture, from fashion, hairstyles, music, or even vernacular, and to this present day with memes.
At this particular time, that's looking like a cap.
Bro, can we see her?
Unfortunately, not right now, bro. You know the vibes. But I promise, if anything changes, I'll pull up.
This fascination has led white Americans to participate in Black culture even though it is historically not theirs. In Culture versus Experience, Popularization of Black Culture in White America, Tamaron Mcknight writes, "There is a clear disconnect between the white mainstream using Black culture, what it means to be Black in America, and the historical significance of the culture. White Americans want to partake and participate in Black culture, but do not want nor to address the Black experience." Doesn't that sound a little bit like Hamilton? It uses Black culture without addressing the Black experience. Black people only exist as actors to uphold the master narrative in Hamilton while utilizing their counter-narrative language. Black culture is influenced by the historical injustices committed against African Americans, such as slavery and Jim Crow, including the social, economic, and political turmoil. Black culture developed in response to the Black American experience. When slaves were brought to America, they brought their music with them and blended it with Christianity to create spirituals, which later evolved into folk music. I talk about this history in my Nina Simone video. A card will be inserted for you to watch somewhere up here. So it was a necessity for survival and communication between one another as a reflection to the oppression felt by slaves after emancipation. They didn't just make this shit up. Blues reflected the harsh reality of racism the Southern Black community felt during the Jim Crow era. This sentiment is also true of rock and country. And so while these genres of music are recognized today as white and for white people, both genres of music have roots in Black culture. Rock and roll evolved from R&B and country evolved from folk and blues. But because of the commodification of the music industry, white record labels gradually rebranded them as white. Elvis Presley is probably the most infamous for stealing from Black culture, whitewashing it, and selling it to a white audience. Sam Phillips, a white American producer that is credited for inventing Elvis Presley's whole shtick, was even quoted in saying that if I could find a white boy who could sing like a Black man, I'd make $1 million. On the topic of Elvis, we should really be celebrating Little Richard and his contribution to the music industry and just music culture in general, because he is the originator, the creator, the innovator, the god of rock and roll. He even wears eyeliner and makeup that would later influence glam rock. He influenced the Rolling Stones, James Brown, the Beatles, And this is why I have such a hard time enjoying musical theater, because the origins of musical theater, the Darth Vader of musical theater, is minstrel blackface. And that legacy continues on with musicals like this.
One of a kind, like dip, 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 doo wop, doo doo. Our names are signed. A boogie, 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 shooby doo wop, shabop.
Womp bom loom bom 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 to the boot, oh rude, 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 to the boot, oh rude. Oh womp bom loom bom 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 bom. I got a girl named Sue. She knows up.
But there are not a single black character in Grease, is there? I wonder why. I wonder why. When you hear You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog, I want y'all to be thinking about Big Mama Thornton.
You ain't nothing but a hound. When Snoopy around the door. You ain't nothing but a hound dog. When Snoopy around the door.
Within black culture, the culture and experience, they're often viewed as two separate entities. Blues is treated as a cultural revolution in the black community, and Jim Crow South is treated as an experience African Americans endured within white America. These things are treated as two separate events that happened around the same time. And so there is no historical context to consider when a white person creates blues music, but this is false. To partake in black culture, one cannot ignore the numerous injustices African Americans have faced and continue to face. These hardships are not the same as the hardship of white Americans or other groups in America, and do not fall under the umbrella of American culture. It is possible to appropriate black culture because it represents a unique experience that outsiders are trying to take part in.
On the water squawk. Stop! You dirty moment cowboy. Bitch, you guessed it. You was right.
I'm not saying that white people or any other groups of members that aren't black don't face hardships. No, we all face hardships, but black people, black community, we face our own separate issue. And we built a culture around that. That's what I'm getting at. Black culture is more than just music and style. It was developed to retain humanity in the face of adversity, and it continues to develop to address the rampant inequalities African Americans live with every day. Black lives and black experiences and culture aren't so much related, rather, they are intertwined. It is rooted in the way African Americans deal with what it's like to be black in America. In embracing black culture, one must also embrace the struggle that goes into creating black culture. This is why divorcing hip hop from its original context and purpose is appropriation. But Hamilton crosses another line when it uses hip hop to tell the stories of elite white men that created the foundation of the institutions and systems of white supremacy in American culture. A culture which developed the reaction that formulated the birth of black culture. And let me be clear about this. Just because black culture is birthed as a response to the violence doesn't mean the culture centers the violence. Slavery may have influenced spirituals, but not every spiritual is about slavery, okay? It is for this reason why Hamilton is not only frustrating, but confusing. It is bombastic in its carelessness and its flippant use of Black culture to paint humanizing images of their oppressors. And I'm going to bring back a source I used for my first Hamilton video. She's my girl, guys. In Renee C. Romano's essay, on the one hand, Hamilton's music and casting choices had the effect of delinking whiteness and the story of the nation's founding. However, traditional national origin sources have focused on the experiences and perspective of elite white men who are celebrated for promoting ideals of liberty and equality they did not follow in practice. People of color, whose histories these myths often ignore, have been offered only the option of celebrating a history that encourages and even demands an innocence or amnesia about the nation's history of racial and gender exclusion. There is no way to separate the experiences of being Black in America and Black culture, because if you were able to, then that in itself is a privilege that only people outside the culture has. Hamilton allows its primarily white audience to take part in and choose the trendy and fun parts of Black culture through the music, the choreography, and exploits the identity of its actors to protect the political powers, institutions, and privileges of the dominant narrative of white America. So there is no way to separate the experiences of being Black in America and Black culture, because if you were able to, then that in itself is a privilege that only people outside the culture have. Hamilton allows its primarily white audience to take part in and choose the trendy and fun parts of Black culture through the music, the choreography, and exploits the identity of its actors to protect the political powers, privileges of the dominant narrative of white America and their institutions. As a Black thespian myself, I'm only speaking as an individual. It is hard to dissect Hamilton, not because it is hard to understand, but as a theatrical piece. Lin utilizes culture with a deep-rooted history of Black struggle and oppression in America to tell a story of white men that exploited and have benefited from their exploited labor. And it is particularly nauseating and deeply saddening to witness it being packaged, marketed, and sold to those in which will never truly appreciate it, much like gangsta rap in the 90s and 80s. It is no wonder why Toni Morrison funded a play that directly criticized Lin-Manuel Miranda. White audiences are being sold activist, rebellion, aesthetics, just like how gangsta rap has been in the 1980s and 90s, but this time it is a multicultural face that is selling this thing to you. And it is being translated into multiple different languages and being shipped off into international arenas. So Lin-Manuel Miranda focused so much time making rap and hip-hop culture work as a framing device to tell the story of Hamilton that he has forgotten to ask himself that even if he could execute this project using hip-hop, should he have even used it to tell the story of white men in the first place? And rather than telling untold stories of Hamilton, Lin chose to write about a history that people already know and learned about in school. Lin may as well be Frankenstein, and Hamilton is his monster. And so let me ask you this final question. Do you think a rap musical written by Black artists about a Black experience will ever be as successful as Hamilton? And if you actually seen my video and comprehended it, you would probably already know my answer. So I hope you enjoy this video. In this particular video series, I tried to incorporate many different kinds of voices and people and their work, so please check out the articles. I will leave them in the description. So thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.